Great. You're going to do intro, Brandon, or should we just get going?
Sure, I can start. Sorry. Yeah. So thank you all for joining us today. We have a professional development opportunity. This event is intended for extension colleagues and also close partners. And I see that we have a mix of folks, both from within extension and also looks like county-based local partners. So welcome everyone. And today we have two wonderful people that you all know very, very well, I assume. Steve Deller and Matt Curis, and they are going to, this is part one of a two-part series that will introduce how to access data. And again, we called it for community economic development, but the processes and the things that will be discussed will be applicable to many different areas. And the beauty of community economic development is basically everything's underneath it too. So with that, and then just as a heads up, part two will be on August 4th, same time, same day. So Thursday, August 4th from 1 to 2. And that will be an application of the data techniques that we learned today. So with that, I will turn it over to Steve and Matt.
Good afternoon, everyone. Again, this is just kind of a professional development opportunity, as Brandon said, to kind of get a better feel for some of the different data sources that we use when we're doing economic analysis and how to kind of use some of those different sources. So there's just kind of an exposure of why we do this kind of stuff and where you can get some of the data and how you can add some value to the data. So as Brandon mentioned, it's going to be two parts. The first part is why do we do data analysis? More importantly, where do we get this data from? And then the second part is that how do we actually add some value to this data? How do we actually analyze some of the data at a fairly simple level? Okay, so why do we do data analysis? Okay, it's a mechanism to stimulate discussion. It's really kind of a way to get people thinking about and talking about a local economic situation. For example, in Jefferson County, before Johnson Creek, which is the big outlet mall there on the interstate, when it was in the very, very early stages, the economic development director there wanted to get the county thinking about economic development beyond just farming and manufacturing, to think about retail. So Steve Grelbo, Dennis, who was the development director at the time there, and myself, we did an analysis of the local retail market. And it was essentially, Dennis was using it as a mechanism to get people talking about retail as a potential mechanism for economic development. So it's a way to stimulate discussion. It's a way to also challenge local perceptions. An example here would be Gary Green and I were asked to go down to Lake Geneva. There were folks in Lake Geneva area that were convinced that the area was growing too rapidly and that they needed to put controls on the growth. We went down there and actually looked at the data and kind of compared it to neighboring counties and the state. We found that actually they were growing slower than the rest of the state. Their perception was incorrect. They never asked us back. Identifying strengths, identifying weaknesses, identifying threats, and identifying opportunities. Again, what we're essentially doing is trying to almost do like a SWOT analysis of what the local economy is. In the end, what we're doing with this data analysis is that it helps you understand what's really happening locally. What's the story of the local economy? And one of the things that I think is really important here is actually getting your hands dirty with the data, because when you actually start working with the data and actually looking at the data, it really kind of deepens your understanding of what's going on. Okay, so issues to consider. One thing is we're looking for patterns. Okay, what's the story of the local economy that we're trying to tell? What are the patterns? What are the themes that are within inside that story? We're looking for comparisons. Looking at your community, your county in isolation doesn't tell you very much. Walworth County and Lake Geneva, looking in isolation, there's no way to kind of judge whether or not, you know, the perception that they're growing too fast is actually true or not. You have to have comparisons. Okay? And that's where there's a lot of kind of art enters the science in terms of what are appropriate comparisons. We're looking for challenges. We're looking for surprises. As a means to stimulate discussion, sometimes these surprises in the data is an excellent way to kind of get a conversation going. We're looking over time. Now here you'll see one of the data sources that we use. We can go back over 50 years, and Tessa and Matt and I are always kind of having a discussion as to how far back you go in terms of time. You go all the way back 50 years in time. I think it's un-American not to use all the data. Matt and Tessa tend to think, a lot of the people in the community weren't born that far back. So that's, it's a point of conversation. Okay, we're looking for insights, not precision. Just because you can carry it out to the 10th decimal place doesn't really help us very much. Okay, when we're looking at, say, next time we're looking at, say, location quotients. Just the fact that you can carry it out to 1.967892 and carry it farther out, that's not what we're looking for. Okay, we're looking for kind of those insights. Okay. And there's many sources, both formal and informal. That's where these surprises can come in, is actually kind of using it to stimulate the conversation, and that informal local knowledge of the economy can help explain and think about why we see these surprises in the data. Okay, so what we're trying to do here is this is called the creativity pyramid. And what we're trying to do in the end is to come up with innovative ideas for community economic development, or community development, if you will. But that innovation is based on the knowledge that we have of what's happening, in this case, the local economy. Okay. Our knowledge of the local economy is based on information. Okay. And that information is all rooted on data. Okay. So what we want to try to do now is to kind of think about, where do we get some of this data? And then the next time is, how do we add value to that data to get to the point of information? Okay. Now, one of the things that is, as Brandon said in his introductory comments, one of the things about community economic development is that it is, what I like about it is that everything falls underneath that umbrella. And one of the things that a lot of folks are starting to use now, it's a systems thinking approach, is the Flores community capitals. Now, Tessa and I just put out a report, the Rural Innovation Report, there, where we tried to quantify the community capitals for Wisconsin counties. The problem is there's just too much data. There's too many things moving on there. Okay, so I'm going to come back to this in a minute. Okay, so one thing to keep in mind is that we're generally trying to determine where the community is now. Where's the community now? Where was it? Where is it now? Where does it look like it's going? Okay, there's a story to be told about the local economy. We are trying to tell that story. Okay, avoid the temptation to do a data dump. It is very, very easy just to overwhelm the community with data. Remember, who's the audience? Okay, a lot of the audience oftentimes is a county board member, a village board member, a concerned citizen, and maybe they had Econ 101 20 years ago, but they're not economists. Okay, you've got to keep in mind who's the audience. That's why we're looking for insights and not necessarily precision. Okay, layers of an onion in layers of more detailed analysis. So we start off kind of at the 30,000 foot level, looking at general trends of what's happening in the local economy. Then we come down to the 20,000 foot level, then the 10, then the 5, and on down. And what we're doing by coming closer and closer is that we're narrowing in on a particular topic that might be of interest. For example, if the community does an economic analysis and they decide they want to focus on housing, then we can kind of go down and do more detailed analysis on that particular sector. Or in the example of Johnson Creek, let's focus down on retail. Okay. So what are the traditional measures that we generally look at when we're looking at the economy? The traditional measures are employment, income, unemployment, population, number of firms, migration rates. Okay, those are kind of the grandparents, if you will, of kind of the economic measures that we do. Some of the other alternative measures are things like retail sales. Some of you may be familiar with the trade area analysis that I do. Same thing with Bill Ryan's and some of Bill Ryan's work. Property values. If you ask economists to come up with one single indicator of what's happening to the local economy, a lot of them will come back and say, look at property values, because a lot of activity is capitalized in property values. So when we look at housing markets, it's kind of a way it's looking at what's happening in the local economy. Income distribution, social indicators like crime rates, dropout rates. Okay, when we start looking at some of these social indicators, we start to come in and bring in some of these other community capitals. Okay, so we can kind of start thinking about the economy in very broad terms, but for our discussion, we want to kind of keep it with the traditional measures. Okay, employment, income, unemployment, things like that. Okay, so again, the innovation, we want to focus on the data. Okay, now the problem is there's too much data. We are drowning in data. And I think when you walk away from today's seminar, you'll find that there's numerous sources of economic data, and you can become overwhelmed with it. So there has to be kind of a systematic game plan in terms of how we want to do this, how we want to do this analysis. That's why that kind of 30,000 foot, 20,000 foot, or layers of an onion, if you will, kind of gives us a game plan in terms of how we want to analyze this. For our purposes today, we're going to look at 4 different sites. Okay, the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis has the FRED system. This is kind of a one-stop center for economic data. The other go-to site is the U.S. Department of Commerce, the BEA REIS data set. That's the one that goes back over 50 years. Okay, the other is the census data. Okay, the data center. This is where we can access the American Community Survey data and a range of other census related. There's also the longitudinal employment household. The census is putting more and more and more data available for people to download. Also, the Wisconsin Department of Workforce Development has been developing a WisEconomy website that is actually very, very useful and very helpful, but it only has Wisconsin data. Okay, so the first one, FRED. This is kind of the interface to the FRED. This is the homepage to it. It includes a variety of topics, housing, inflation. It includes tools for charting, mapping. You can download the data. However, the downloading the data is, if you're interested in, say, your county, and you want to look at, say, housing prices in your county, it's very easy to download and interact at. But if you say, I want to get housing prices for all the counties in Wisconsin, it's pretty cumbersome. Okay. It allows for data to be indexed. Let's walk through this. Let's just take a few minutes here and kind of walk through what this looks like. Okay, so you should be seeing, let me know, you should be seeing the FRED website on the screen. Are you?
No, we're still seeing your slides.
Okay.
You might have to reshare, Steve.
I got to reshare.
Yeah.
There, I thought I was so slick having that embedded. Got it now?
Yep.
Thank you. And here I thought I was so slick embedding the links into the PowerPoint. Okay, this is the web. This is the kind of the entry page that you come into. What I want to do is I want to go to the categories, because that's kind of the index of the table of contents, if you will. So if you click on that, you come to this page, and this is where all the different categories of information, money and banking. Say you want to look at interest rates. You know, there's over 440 different streams of data there. There's over almost 2,500 different data items related to banking. For example, financial indicators. When you want to look at, say, kind of the health of banks, this is a great place to go to. You want population and employment and whatnot, job openings, turnover rates. This is some new information that's available. You can kind of come here. There's even tax data. There's unemployment data here. There's cost and productivity. Okay. Productivity analysis, prices. You want to know what's happening to inflation? Here's a good source. You can come here and you can look at all the different indicators of inflation. I think what we want down here is this regional data right here. And to kind of get data for your particular county, you want to click on the states here. Okay, and the states will take us to this. And let's go down, let's slide down, let's find Wisconsin. And notice there's over 11,000 different pieces of data related to Wisconsin. Now, the first thing that pops up is that this is data for Wisconsin. Okay, and for example, some of the data that I've been using a lot is housing price index for Wisconsin. So if you click on that, what it does is that it pops you and it actually graphs the data out for you. And I think several of you have probably seen this particular chart cut and pasted, where there's the housing bubble, it popped, we went into the Great Recession, it's coming back up. Uh-oh, are we going into another housing bubble? Okay, you can get this and you can easily download this. Okay, you can just click download and you can walk through the process. I won't do that now. Okay. Labor force participation rates, gross domestic product, all industries, resident population. Resident population goes all the way back to 1900. Okay, so it's a good one-stop center. The other is that it's got the counties. Okay, now notice that almost each county here, there's at least 88 different streams of data. So let's pick one here. Let's pick Dunn County. Okay, here's the data that's available for Dunn County, the unemployment rate for Dunn County, and you can see when it starts how far through it goes. It's not seasonally adjusted. Okay, there's the labor force for Dunn County, high school graduation rates. Okay, this is something, notice that this starts in 2010 and goes up to 2020. What Fred is doing is that it's starting to go into the American Community Survey and is starting to extract some of the information out of the American Community Survey and is making it available here. Okay, percent of the population below the poverty rate. Okay, where's the median household income, unemployment rate? I'm looking for the housing index, mean commute time. I wonder what the mean commute time looks like for Dunn County. Okay, you can actually see how the mean commute time has been increasing a little bit. It went flat, and then you can see COVID hit, and the commute time dropped like a rock. Okay, this is something that Matt Kears has been working on, looking at commuting patterns and whatnot. And here's a particular piece of information that you can get for Dunn County. This is a wonderful site. I come and use this to a large extent. Combined violent and property crime. In Dunn County, the crime rate's going down. Okay, and this is actually kind of a national trend. The crime rate is generally going down over time. Okay, I'm going to, for the sake of time, I'm going to stop sharing this particular screen and go on to go back to that. That's one data source that we use. I use this source a lot. Okay. The other data source is the BEA Reese. This is another one of my go-to favorites. This includes employment, income, population. It's county level. It covers every county in the US going back to 1969. And this is where Matt and Tess and I have these discussions. Do you go all the way back to 1969 or do you look like the last 20 years? There's no right or wrong answer to that. The other thing that's quite useful is it uses metro, non-metro, national level data. If you remember the Wisconsin Rural Economics Summit, we were talking about differences between metro and non-metro. I got the data from this particular site. So let's go into this site. And I'm going to have to stop sharing screen and change screens. And where is it? There it is. Okay, you should be seeing the website for the BEA release. Okay, it does have a mapping function that you can map data. It has current releases. Okay, now what we want is down here, this interactive data, this one right there. Okay, and it can actually, you know, do you want the tables? You want to get data? Do you want to get at the maps? Or do you want what's called these bare facts things where they kind of put together a profile? Let's look at the interactive data because we want the actual data. Okay, and you will find this thing pops up all the time. I have responded, taken out that survey and said, please stop making that thing pop up every time you go in here. Okay, in addition to state level data, which you can find up here, gross state domestic product, personal income by state, you know, gross domestic by metropolitan areas, income. What we want is this stuff down here. This is kind of county level stuff. Okay, you can also get consumer expenditure data and some other arts and cultural productivity, outdoor recreation by state. They have some other stuff. They're constantly adding to this. The one is, let's look at this kind of economic profile that it puts together. Okay, so let's click on that. What we want is a county. You could pick a metropolitan area, micro. You could do the non-metropolitan, metropolitan across the different states. This is where I got the data for that economic summit. Okay, now, a lot of times here you could pick, you know, what you want. A lot of times what I do is I want all the counties in the US because I'm doing some kind of analysis. Let's drop down though to Wisconsin. Okay, click on Wisconsin and hit next. You can get all the counties in Wisconsin if you want. You get the state total, or you can get an individual county. Now, for example, let's grab Barron County. Now, if you do this kind of control click, you can actually highlight the two. Remember, we want to do a comparison. So in this case, we're going to compare Barron County to the state of Wisconsin. Okay, what's the data that's in here? Okay, all sorts of data here: population, dividend interest and rent, personal income maintenance benefits. Okay, per capita dividends, interest and rent. This is one that sometimes we use as a measure of wealth. Okay, wages and salaries, proprietors' income, farm proprietors, total employment, wage and salary employment, proprietors' employment. There's just a wealth of data here. Now, I want all the data. Okay, now how many years do you want? Okay, how far back do you want to go? It goes all the way back to 1969. I want all the data. I think it's un-American not to use all the data. Next step, and boom, it downloads the data for you. Or it doesn't download it, it presents the data for you. Okay, so now this is all for Wisconsin. You can scroll down and you can actually then see the data for Barron County. Now, notice up here, they've got a nice download function. Okay, just click on that and you can say, I want it myself, because I want to play with it. Download it. I'm going to have to stop sharing and change screens again. Right. This is, yes, I see that. Oh, okay. This is all that data we were just, Windows is closed. Sorry about that. I hit the wrong button. Okay, now here's all the data. Okay, now this is where we can start doing things. Okay, we can start looking at changes over time. We can start doing growth indices. We can start to do kind of what percent of income is coming from wages and salaries? What percent is coming from non-work? We can start to kind of look at different layers of the onion of that economic data. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing that and go back to the PowerPoint. You can start to see the feel here where we can start to get overwhelmed with data. You can drown in the data. Okay. The other large one is the census, and this is largely, well, we'll see in a minute. Age structure, household family structures, occupation, industry, journey to work, income, education, attainment. This is kind of the granddaddy of all sites. And again, I'm going to have to shift screens here. Where is it? Where is it? There it is. Okay. This is kind of the interface, if you will, for a lot of the census data. Okay. And it kind of defaults onto the census of government. I don't know why it defaults on the census of government. That's what it defaults to. Now, over here is how you can kind of pick through what you want to look at. Now, for example, geography, you can look at the nation, you can look at states, you can look at counties, places, zip codes, metropolitan tract. Okay, let's look at counties. Okay, again, you can download all the counties in the US if you wanted to. Let's go down to Wisconsin. Okay, which county do we want? Let's stick with Dunn County. Okay, well, let's look Dunn County. What's close to Dunn County? Oh, I'm just going to pick a couple there. Okay, so I got my comparisons. Okay, now topic. What topic do I want? Okay, if I click on that, there's business and economic, there's education, there's a range. Income, poverty, all this kind of stuff. Let's say we want to look at education, educational attainment. Okay, click on that. Now, that's our filters. Let's close that. Now, here is all the different types of educational attainment data that the census can provide for you. Now, here's the actual estimates. There's Dodge County, percent of the population, and it starts to get in excruciating detail. Okay. Now you can look at Dodge County. You can then compare it to male, female, percent female. There's Dunn County. Okay. We can download this and then compare it and then keep on going over it. And we can compare to Eau Claire County. Now, one of the things that you'll want to notice here is this margin of error. Now, generally, if you're looking at, remember that the American Community Survey is a survey, which means that there is a margin of error. Now, the thing with the American Community Survey is that you can get extremely detailed at the smallest level. So think of the smallest community in your county. I can find this data for that community in excruciating detail. The problem is that the margin of error will be so big that it's like, I've got an estimate. I can estimate how many veterans there are that are unemployed in this really small community. Okay, it says that there are 3 unemployed veterans in this county or in this municipality, in this little tiny town. Okay, but the margin of error is 3. Okay, so do you trust that number? Yeah, maybe, maybe not. Okay, but this is where actually looking at the data and playing with the data can actually really help you get a better understanding of what's happening in that local economy. Okay. Some other things. Say we don't want to look at educational attainment. We can go back to the filters bar and we can say, let's get rid of that. Okay, we don't want to look at that. Okay, and it kind of defaults back to some, age. And so you want to know what the age distribution is? There it is. Okay. Actually, let's just look at this. Now, one of the things that you can do here is that you can actually start to download this. Okay. And if you download it, it's downloading. Okay, I'm going to have to change screens again. There it is, right there. Okay. There's my data. Okay. And I can do what I want to with it. Okay. And I can compare Dodge County to Dunn County to Eau Claire County to get a feel for the age profile. That one. Now, one of the things that, well, I think for the sake of time, I'm going to stop with this. Okay, but this is kind of the granddaddy. The other thing is you come down to years and you can actually kind of, you know, this is, remember with Fred, it had the poverty rate. No, it had the commuting distance or the commuting times, and it went back from 2020 to 2000. What it was essentially doing is that this is the years of all the American Community Surveys, the 5-year averages, and it's essentially pulling this data and putting it into another interface for you to work. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing there, go back to the PowerPoint. Where's the PowerPoint? There's the PowerPoint. Okay, so between Fred and BEA-REIS and the American Community Census, or the census files here, you can just be overwhelmed with the amount of data. And it's really, that's why when you go into this, it's oftentimes, you know, why are we doing this? Who's the audience? And how do we convey the story of the local economy without doing a data dump? Because I'm sure you've all seen presentations where people have gotten up there and at slide 50 of tables or graphics, you're starting to glaze over. Okay. Now, the key here is that as the quote unquote analyst, okay, by digging into this data and looking at this data and kind of shifting and winnowing, if you will, through all this data, you start to get some insights to help you tell that story. Okay. The next site is a data source that Matt uses on a much more frequent basis than I do. I've only started to play around with this data source, and it's pretty powerful. And well, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand the baton off to Matt and let Matt pick it up and go from here.
All right, thanks, Steve. I'm just gonna go ahead and share my screen now. Okay, everyone see okay? Are you seeing, just one second here.
Yes.
There we go. Yeah, as Steve said, you know, this is a website that I use quite a bit. And one of the things I like about it is that it has a wide variety of information related to employment, primarily by industry. And one of the things that it does that you'll see when you compare it to some other data sets out there related to industry of employment, things like the BEA-REIS that Steve showed, things like the quarterly census of employment and wages that I'll show here in a minute, is that a lot of times, especially in smaller, less populous areas, you'll get a lot of suppression in the data. simply because the Census Bureau or other data providers will not want to disclose what an individual employer might have for employment at that establishment. What this data set does, though, however, is avoid some of those problems by introducing what's called noise or distortions into the data set, where the data is statistically similar to the underlying data that it's based on, but it allows you to look at the data without having these suppressed cells. So a lot of times this will help us look at trends or look at individual employment by industry sectors without having to say that we don't know what the numbers are because of suppression. And I'm going to go through each of these slides before I flip over and show you a little bit more how to use the individual websites, just to, for the sake of time.
Matt, we're seeing the presenter view right now.
Oh, you are?
Yes.
Oh, just a second. Are you seeing it now?
Now we're seeing just the slide.
Just a
Thank
slide,
you.
okay. It's just reversed on my screens. Another one that I use quite a bit is also from the local employment household dynamics product from the Census Bureau, and that's called On the Map. And I'm sure many of you have used this website because it has a lot of great information showing where workers live in a given area versus where they might be employed. So a lot of commuting flow data that helps you understand the size of your labor market, as well as characteristics of people that may be commuting into or out of your community are available through this website. So it has information on if you live in a given community, what communities or counties or regions or other types of geographies people may commute into or from, the earnings those individuals may have, what industries they may work on, and really gives you a sense of how big and diverse your labor market may be. And this is also, as I mentioned, same with the quarterly workforce indicators on the previous slide, based on synthetic data. So it allows you to look at data without a lot of information being suppressed, but still have some confidence in the validity of the data set. Then the final one I'll go through here in a minute is Wisconomy, and Steve mentioned this early in the introduction. This is a Wisconsin-specific website from the Department of Workforce Development, and it has a lot of really diverse data sets related to unemployment rates, related to employment and wages by different types of industry sectors or subsectors, occupational breakdowns. And as we get into the website here in a minute, you'll see all the diverse data that's available for Wisconsin communities. As Steve did mention, this is Wisconsin specific. So a lot of times, if you do want to do comparisons to other places outside the state, there is a companion website from the Bureau of Labor Statistics that has a lot of the same information that you can go into and get some of this for national comparisons, or as well as for perhaps state to state comparisons or counties outside the state of Wisconsin. We're not going to go through that one today, but it is available and it is a great resource as well. So let me stop sharing here and flip over to the right one here. Here we go. Okay, this is the first website I shared from the LEHD program from the Census Bureau. This is the quarterly workforce indicator kind of visualization website that they offer. And what you'll see here is that we have the ability to select different geographies. So here we're looking at information for the state of Wisconsin. So again, we can change our geography to the United States or a different state. And then we can also filter by different geographies. So here we are looking at the state, but we can also break it down and look at individual counties. So here, perhaps maybe I'll pick just Jefferson County because Steve brought it up earlier. And you'll now see the data changes and it gives information for just Jefferson County. You can filter on different industries. So if I want to look at perhaps manufacturing trends, even though Steve is looking at retail in Jefferson County, you can see it again that it gives trends in terms of employment for Jefferson County over time. We can also go back further, as Steve said, it's sometimes un-American not to use all the information that's available to you, and you will see that this data set is quarterly based, but goes back to 1990. And if I wanted to include all of those quarters, I could just simply click on individual quarters, press OK, and you'll see how far back the information goes to for manufacturing in Jefferson County. What's interesting about this data set, and one way that I use it quite a bit, is to look at the age structure of employment within a given county and a given industry. So we know in the state of Wisconsin that our workforce is getting older, and some industries are being affected more so than others in terms of how rapidly the workforce is aging, or if there's a healthy balance of older people versus younger people within that industry. We can get good perspectives on what the age distribution might look like. So right now, you can see the different trend lines are showing the distribution of employment by different ages. So we have age 14 to 18, 19 to 21, all the way up to 55 to 64, and 65 to 69. So again, here we can see changes over time in terms of the number of employees in manufacturing in Jefferson County that are between the ages of 55 to 64, and see how they're going up over time. We can also normalize it by other types of characteristics. So we have worker characteristics here for gender, age, what we have right now, education, race, ethnicity. So as you can see, there's a lot of different ways to kind of slice and dice this information for a given industry in a given area. And as Steve said, this is one way that you can kind of start drowning in data. There's so much data available to you. The other way that you can use this website is not just to use the visualization tools, but if you know exactly what you're looking for and know you're going to download the data anyway and want to manipulate it on your own, you can use this second link that allows you just to filter the data and download it. So in this instance, I'm going to go to Wisconsin, which is already selected. Or I can click on Wisconsin here on the side where I get the individual counties. I can get metro versus micropolitan areas. I can get workforce investment areas, but let's stick with counties and just go through the process as we did before. If we pick on Jefferson again, click on continue to firm characteristics, I can pick the different industries I want to take a look at. I can break it down by private ownership or all ownership. Let's pick all ownership in this instance. I may want to break it down even further into subsectors within the county. So instead of picking all manufacturing, maybe I will just pick food manufacturing. And then different worker characteristics. If I want to do it by gender, if I just want to see, for instance, all the females working in food manufacturing in Jefferson County. I can go to, if I want to look at total employment, if I want to look at turnover within that industry to see how many people are entering and exiting employment within that industry sector. I can look at earnings if I want to for that industry sector for just females in just Jefferson County. And then again, I can select my quarters. Click on continue to summary and export. You have to submit the request and then you'll see your results pop up as a download. So you just have the raw data in an Excel file. So again, very detailed information for smaller geographic areas, but again, can be somewhat overwhelming due to the fact that there is so much data available. Okay. This is the On the Map resource that I mentioned before. And again, this is a very powerful source of information to look at your commuting shed and the extent of your labor market. And all you need to do here is to enter a geography. And you can see that you have availability to search by states, by counties, by places, county subdivisions, census tracts, school districts, and so on down the line. So you can filter this by quite a number of different geographies. So let's take a look at, say, Grant County. If I click on Grant, it'll give me all the municipalities that have, or our geographies that have Grant in them somehow. If I click on Grant County, Wisconsin, It'll zoom me in and I can choose to perform analysis on the selection area. I can pick the type of analysis I want to do. So do I simply want to profile the people that either work in Grant County or those that reside in Grant County? Do I want to compare them to other places to do some of those comparisons that Steve talked about earlier? Or do I want to see where they're coming from or going to? So for instance, in this case, I can pick on destination. For the people that work in Grant County, what counties did they come from? And then what years do I want to look at? So 2019 back to 2002. And then the types of jobs. Do I want to pick all jobs, primary jobs, private jobs, or private primary jobs? The difference is that a primary job is the job where people earn their greatest amount of income, and all jobs include all jobs in the county regardless. So if people hold more than one job, they'll be included in that all jobs category. Then obviously private versus public, you can just filter out public sector versus private sector jobs. So if I click on go, I'll get a map and a table showing me where the individuals are coming from that work in Grant County. We can see that about 57% of them also live in Grant County, but we also see that about 5.5% of the people that work in Grant County live in Lafayette County. We see the share in Iowa County, Dubuque County, and so on and so forth. We can also filter this in terms of the types of workers. So if I just want individuals that are commuting into Grant County that are age 55 or older, I can click on that. And you'll see the numbers change. I can print a chart or a map that I see on the screen. I can also get detailed information in terms of the report, breaking it down in terms of a table, as well as the option to export it to a PDF, export to Excel, or export it to a HTML file. And again, that's just one small example of what you can do with this resource, but there are a lot of different ways that you can break down the types of individuals that are working in your community versus living in your community and how far they're willing to travel. The final website that I'll share is the Wisconomy website. And again, this is produced by the state of Wisconsin's Department of Workforce Development. And for you, primarily what you're going to focus on are the data tools. So if I click on access data, I'll be given a number of different menus that I can use to kind of search the types of information that I'm interested in. So you're given a category that you maybe want to take a look at. So it may be businesses, maybe employment of different types, income and taxes, labor force, occupations, projections of different types, unemployment rate, and so on and so forth. So let's look at occupations just as a way to look at something a little bit different that we haven't considered yet. So if I click on occupation, I can then pick on my subcategories. And here we see occupational employment wages from the OEWS program, or we can look at projections. So I'm just going to pick the OEWS data. The types of area we're interested in, you kind of see a theme between this website as well as the other websites we've looked at. We can break it down into United States is available in this instance, but in a lot of cases it's not for this website, state, county, metropolitan division, and so on and so forth. Let's just pick a metropolitan statistical area and I click apply. And then I can choose the MSA I want to take a look at. Let's take a look at Fond du Lac. Click apply. I can pick the years, and for this, in this instance, Fond du Lac is a newer MSA, so we only have data for 2021, but in other instances, you'll have more historical data to choose from. So if I click apply, it's all annual data in this instance, but in other instances, it may be monthly, it may be quarterly. And then there's only one option for the occupational classifications that are used here. And here I can break it down in terms of the types of detail I want, whether it's a major occupation group, all occupations, broad categories, or detailed occupations. Let's just stick with 2 digits for now. And I click apply. And then here you can pick the individual occupations you want, or you can just select them all, which is what we'll do here. And then all industries is the only option for this this table. And then we can do hourly or annual. Let's just do annual wage. And then we have the option to generate the report, which shows up on the bottom of your screen. And here you can see the number of occupations in these different categories, what their annual average wages are, what their entry wages, what the wages for experienced individuals, median wages, and so on and so forth. And again, if we scroll down, we can see the broad occupational categories of computer mathematical occupations, life, physical, social science, legal, and so on and so forth. You'll see here that not all the data is always displayed on the first screen, so you may have to go through it link by link, or you can again download it in an Excel file, which is probably the easiest way to look at some of this information. There are also ways to create visualizations. Just for the sake of time, I won't go through this, but we do have ways to, they provided ways to look at some of this information in a tabular manner, as well as charts using Tableau. So again, you know, there's a lot of information here, and then this theme that you're seeing is that we are drowning in data, but I think the only way for you to kind of really get comfortable with it is to just kind of start exploring some of these resources and playing around with them. I think that's, I can't speak for Steve, but that's how I got comfortable with them, was just kind of trying to see if I could break them or not.
I think that's great. You know, it's the exact same thing. When I teach my master's level course, one of the projects I have them do is an economic profile. Pick a county and do an economic profile. And I try to tell them what I'm doing is I'm throwing them into the deep end of the pool in terms of too much data. And the point of the project is, do they sink or swim? And it's simply that the intent is to have them become more comfortable with the array of different sources of information, and how you're not going to hurt yourself if you dive into one of these sites and you start playing around with it. And as Matt says, see if you can break it, and just download and just play with the data. And that playing with the data is where oftentimes you get those insights. The other thing is that with our EDA University Center, when we first got it 6 years ago, one of the things that we had thought about was putting together a data interface tool for our county educators and community partners so that they could access data. And the more we looked at it, the more it's like, why are we reinventing the wheel? Workforce Development is doing this. The Department of Revenue is doing this. The Census Bureau is doing this. Why are we replicating what all these other agencies are doing? The thing is, though, is that some of them are, it's almost like a foreign language. If you don't use it on a fairly regular basis, you tend to forget it. And that's why a lot of times finding 3 or 4 places for data that you're comfortable with, those are the places you keep going back to. And you become comfortable with those sites, and you kind of know what you can do and what you can't do. And then if you find yourself asking a question, it's like, okay, well, now we're down at the 500-foot level, and the data that I need isn't in my go-to places. That's when you drop Matt, me, Tessa a note and say, hey, where can I find this data? But it's really kind of just play with it. And the more you play with it, the more comfortable you become, and the better at telling that local story. Okay. I think one of the things I joke when I teach is I do that creativity pyramid, and I kind of, it's on the PowerPoint. It looks like a pyramid, and then I draw it on the whiteboard, and it almost, that data component is getting so wide that it's almost overwhelming. And that's one of the, it's, how many of these sources do we share with you? It's like, okay, well, let's find the kind of the key ones that we feel comfortable with, that Matt feels comfortable with, that I feel comfortable with, and kind of just say that they're out there for you. Questions? I didn't see a whole lot popping up in the chat. Nobody's got their, this is like teaching remotely. I don't know if the students are paying attention or if they're sleeping. Hello, James. Kristen, there's going to be a quiz on this.
I took notes, so I'm ready.
Took notes? Good.
Yeah, I just have
Question?
bad hair today, so I'm going back off camera.
Any questions or comments?
I think that this is great. This is Carl. I would say that last one, the Wisconsin, that was what I was drawing from when I was looking at that. What is sort of the county display or array of jobs, and it was there that I was realizing that some of the data, I think from a county that I did, I think I did Grant County, and it only had about 50 to 60% of the jobs listed. So there's some potential, just to be aware of that and to ask those questions, how reliable or how, what's my margin of error on this, I think is important to keep in mind. But I think all these different data sets are wonderful and have so much information, and really, yeah, you just kind of got to roll up your sleeves and plow into them.
Carl, you're right. And that's where that local knowledge comes into play. I've been downloading data from the website, the Department of Revenue website that you found on housing sales. And I've been downloading the data, and, I found a couple of counties where there was a huge spike in prices, residential prices. And when you look, go, what's wrong with that? You dig into it, you find, oh, Jesus, they included the sale of an apartment complex that had over 200 units. And that caused a spike in the data. So that kind of is like actually, digging in and looking at that data and kind of having that local knowledge kind of helps you, go, oh, I trust that data. That I trust, but this one, oh, I don't trust that. And that local knowledge, but you don't get that by just simply looking at a report that somebody else generated. You don't get those kind of insights.
Steve, if I may, one of the things I look at in data is change over time. That's really important to me, but I'm not always sure that the data they're comparing is aggregated the same way, that they may have changed their standards on how they classify certain things over time. And while I know sometimes they'll reference or that they've made some changes, in most cases I'm not, I'm just trusting that it's the same stuff.
That is where insight versus precision comes into play. And you match that with your local knowledge, because if you're looking at over time, say you're looking over time, changes over time, and you see a spike, right? One, that's a surprise. So your first question is that a data error problem? Or is it something that, did they change the definition on it? Or is it something actually happened? And it's a teachable moment. So that's where that kind of, insight versus precision, local knowledge, looking for surprises, and can you explain why that happened? If you can't explain why it happened, and nobody can explain why that happened, then I'd go back and say, there's something wrong with the data.
So sometimes those surprises are also what help to illustrate maybe there could be an issue with the data. Is like the situation you talked about, Steve. Why did whole prices spike so? And it's because of what they were using.
That's right.
So just, I don't want to stop conversation, but I do want to be respectful of everyone's time. I don't know if Matt and Steve want to stick around for just a little bit if anybody has a question, specific questions. But just as a couple of side notes, this video, as well as all the links, I mean, there's a lot of data, and the PowerPoint presentations of Steve and Matt will share. All of it will be located on a website that I will share out to everyone in the Institute, but especially those who have registered. So you'll be able to find the sources and then also some of the steps to walk through. And again, this is just part one. And if there are things as you're sort of playing with these data sources, which I think is probably the best advice, is to just jump in and get used to them. If you have questions, we do have amazing colleagues that have an answer. So of course, Matt, Steve, Tessa, Kristen are great resources. Carl has done a lot of this, and I know many of you have done it as well. So please feel free to lean on one another if you have questions about the data sources. So I'm going to stop recording. Thank you, everybody. If you need to jump off, we understand. And if you have questions for Matt or Steve, I think they'll probably field a couple of questions. So have a nice day.